So
are we live, by the way? Are
No,
we
we're
live
gonna
yet?
we're live, but they can't hear us yet. So now
Oh, okay.
we are going to Oh no, we're not. Hi
We're not?
everybody.
Okay.
Hi everybody.
Oh.
We are here, but we are not yet live because I did something silly.
So when you said hi, everyone, you meant hi, Darren, right?
Well, they can hear us now.
Oh.
So they can hear us
hello,
now.
hello, people. They just can't see us.
But they
Okay,
cannot
cool.
see us yet, and
For somebody who does this once a week, I should be less confused by like how this works.
Sure.
Yeah, I should be less like I'm talking into a void.
It's tough for you because you can't like see the live feed, which I totally get. Let's see here. Oh no, everybody. Technical problems.
Okay, cool.
We're having technical problems in that so I use open broadcasting software. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I use open broadcasting software and the image our overlay image, right?
Oh, that's why when I have the thing open in the background, it's just doing the wait for stream thing.
Right.
That means we're not live, but we apparently are live just in the background of it.
Exactly.
Oh, cool. And people are now saying it's borked, which is good.
It's super borked. So yeah, what's happening here is the little overlay that goes over our faces somehow got detached from the thing. So like we could go live now, but you would just see both of our screens in a black void. There's no overlay for some reason.
Should be a very 2021 feeling, wouldn't it?
Yes.
From the black void.
That's exactly what we're doing. We're coming to you from the black void. I'm attempting to reconnect our still image now, because that's the kind of podcast that this is at the moment.
That we are.
This is the kind of, we're doing it live where I want to make sure everybody who's here is, yep, you guys hear now all the angry noises my computer is making.
See, now, for situations like this, I should have like a long anecdote prepared. That's like a nice conversational piece that could kind of distract listeners as you go about doing stuff that you actually need to do and don't have to tune in to what I'm saying at all. So, I think, well, let's start with a story from my own life. I've been watching a lot of Godzilla movies lately, actually. I've been going back. I've been watching a bunch of the Toho ones. I have to admit, I'm actually really impressed with some of the Gonzo stuff.
Oh.
I don't know if you've seen all of the Toho ones, but like Godzilla versus Hedorah is a ride. It is phenomenal. It is like I am awed that this thing even exists. It's a Godzilla art house movie. It's Godzilla versus pollution, but like they keep cutting to a nightclub where there's like these young Japanese mods playing, and there's a Japanese hippie band at one point, and like continually throughout the film, they will, presumably for budget reasons, keep showing you updates on what's happening via the local in-universe news.
Oh.
But it's done using these animated graphics like you would expect from actual news coverage. It's like, oh, Hedorah cracked open a tanker and drank it like with a bottle of Coke or whatever. But it'll be this adorable, anthropomorphic, like animated, kind of like Hanna-Barbera, like 1970s illustration of this giant pollution monster just slurping on like the inside of a giant tanker. It's delightful in Gonzo. There's a sequence where like it refuses to eat a cat because it feeds on pollution. So it just kind of swarms into this kind of nightclub, and there's just this cat that's covered in pollution with its eyes staring at you. It's phenomenal. I would wholeheartedly recommend it if you get a chance to see it. And also I really like Mothra. I have to admit, I was surprised how much I like. Nobody talks about Mothra that much, but it has this kind of weird energy to it where it's
Here, hold on. I think we're ready. We're now going to
Oh!
We did it. We just did it. We've now
Good job, Jack, because I didn't have anything to say about Mothra. That was a nice save.
We now transitioned
just in time. I had nothing left.
To the actual episode where I'm just going to say, I think like Mothra is one of those like kaiju monsters that like there is a dedicated and very vocal fan base for, but that like hasn't really like crossed over to mainstream.
Yeah.
If that is something I can say.
Is it the Shinobi? Is that what they call them? Like the tiny little singing women who like they're played by, I think, the Peanuts, this Japanese like pop band from.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I know people are here like we want to hear them talk about like Chaos Walking and Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yeah.
And, Promising a Woman. But Darren's like, no. We're going to talk about like 1960s Japanese monsters. But like the little Shinobi, who are such a great concept. They're these two like Japanese pop stars who are like
Mhm.
composited like into suitcases
Mhm.
on a regular basis. It's delightful. Anyway, sorry, we should get to actual discussion of business. Apologies about this.
No, that was great. That was great filler, Darren. You did it. You bought me enough time to get to the overlay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This week, we are first. We're going to talk about Chaos Walking because no one cares to see it. Then we're going to talk about Judas and the Black Messiah because most people already know the ending. And then we are going to end with Promising Young Woman, and because we will and we'll warn before we get into spoilers. But once we get into Promising Young Woman spoiler talk, you kind of have to talk about the whole movie if you're going to talk about Promising Young Woman. Hi and welcome. This is the Escapist Movie Podcast. Who dang, who darn, we made it. Hi everyone. Here's the situation, Darren. We've been kind of doing a really good job of sticking to two main topics on the podcast. It works really good, especially with the live format, the little interaction we have. We can fill time with two topics. And I was a big dummy, and I said, "Hey, Chaos Walking came out like a week and a half ago. I haven't heard one word about this damn movie. We should watch it. That would be dumb." And we did.
And I enabled.
And
That's what I did.
you enabled, but here's the thing: it's bad. It's a bad movie, which is great, but it's not funny bad. Unfortunately, like it's not so bad it's good.
It's a very particular kind of bad. And like I remember sitting down to watch it, and it's kind of weird because I, like yourself, had heard nothing about it. It was just that, and like it stars Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley, two of the like biggest stars of modern franchise movies. And I
It
know
stars Spider-Man and Ray Palpatine. This should be like up there.
I think you mean Ray Skywalker. Thank you very much. Yeah. Anyway, like, and I know that movie stars don't exist anymore, and I know that like Chris Hemsworth's career, and I love Chris Hemsworth's career, but Chris Hemsworth's career is basically movie stars don't exist anymore. The conceptual exercise where it's like, okay, I'm gonna make a Michael Mann movie, and nobody's gonna care. You should all watch Black Hat; it's fantastic. But like, I remember like going, if this is a Tom Holland movie, Tom Holland has a huge vocal online fandom. I know Daisy Ridley does as well. Why is nobody talking about this? And I sat down to watch it, and I had done no research outside of you reaching out to me and saying, hey, we should talk about this. And me demonstrating my free will was like, yeah, that's a great idea. We should also sit down and watch this. So I sat down and watched it, and it was immediately, I knew exactly what this movie was, and I knew its backstory almost immediately, which is kind of striking. Shout out to Nick for recognizing Chris Hemsworth was surprisingly good Bad Times at the RL. You should also all watch Bad Times at the RL. When I say Chris Hemsworth is proof that movie stars don't exist anymore, that is not a judgment on Chris Hemsworth. That's a judgment on all of us. But anyway, back to the point that I was making there, which is I sat down and I immediately knew what kind of movie this was, because it's a young adult adaptation. Very much a product of the peak young adult boom that like arguably began with the Harry Potter movies, but exploded with Twilight, with the Hunger Games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then kind of you got into Divergent, Affliction, all that sort of stuff. And like the Maze Runner. Remember the Maze Runner movies? I don't. But yet they had these kind of like, there was this big explosion in the mid 2010s where like every studio was spending insane amounts of money buying these books that were aimed at young adults, putting hot young stars in them, generally a male lead, a female lead, and a character actor playing the villain, and was just like, yeah, this will make a shed load of money. And then what's really weird is that stopped around 2017. And I remember I sat down and I watched this and I was like, this feels very much like a 2017 movie. And then I checked the Wikipedia page and like I did some Googling, and you'll never guess what. This is a 2017 movie. Has
this just been broiling on the back burners for 3-4 years at this point?
Yeah, what happened is basically the original script. It's based on a series of novels, the Chaos Walking novels. I think that it was The Knife of Never Letting Go was the original book, based by Patrick Ness, and they bought the rights to that in 2011. And there've been a number of go rounds on this, and like again, like the behind the scenes stuff on this is much better than the actual film itself. At one stage, they hired Charlie Kaufman, the writer of Being John Malkovich and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, to write a script for this around about 2013.
Oh,
that naturally,
no.
oh yes, surprisingly, that didn't work out, and they had to go back to basics and basically had to start the movie from scratch after that happened in 2013. And I mean, I love Kaufman, but I'm kind of like, I see why this is a bad idea. But like, so that
But
they
like,
got
you are out of ideas if you like, hey, the guy that made a movie about how he's unable to make an adaptation? Let's have him do our adaptation. What was that movie called again?
Yeah, adaptation. I don't know. Nicolas Cage won 2 Oscars for it. It's all good. It's grand. I believe that, and again, quick sidebar here. I believe that's the only time that one of the few times a fictional characters actually managed to win an Oscar, because Donald Kaufman, his fictional twin, also won the Oscar for writing it. And obviously there are exceptions with the Blacklist and stuff like that. But anyway, so 2013, they take a look at the script, and surprisingly, they're like, this isn't really what we were looking for with our sexy young adult thing. They go back to the drawing board. They finally get ready about 2015, 2016. And this is beautiful. They land the perfect cast in 2016. They managed to get Daisy Ridley, who's literally just coming off The Force Awakens at this point. She hasn't done The Last Jedi. She hasn't done anything else. They got Tom Holland. Tom Holland has literally just done Civil War. He hasn't even done like his own Spider-Man movie yet. Also he's done Pilgrimage, which is it's a small Irish film that he did as well around the same time, where like all these people looked into realizing that like, Tom Holland is ridiculously talented at exactly the right time to capitalize on this. And so they did this, and they got these 2 actors in, they did some shoots in it, and they managed to get it all shot, I think about 2016-ish, right? Then it hits the editing bay, and they're like, Jesus Christ, this thing is a dog with fleas on it. We need to reshoot this. And they're like, okay, well, let's get everybody back. So Daisy Ridley, she's not doing anything big at the moment, right? She's not doing anything that would affect any availability, right? Tom Holland, he's got to be free. He's not like chained up to a series of franchise movies that's going to have him like occupied for every waking minute for the foreseeable future. And then naturally they had to end up reshooting around the schedules of Ridley and Holland, which is why it took as long as it did. It was originally meant to come out in March. I know it's like this cacophony of errors. Like this movie that should have released in 2013. They then finally managed to hit a scheduled date. They're going to release it in March 2019. And they're like, you know what? This is good, and we're all set for this. But you know what? I think, just trust me on this. I think if we wait just 1 year into 2020, that'd be perfect. I feel if we release it in like summer 2020, this will do gangbusters. Surprisingly, it did not. And then you end up with this kind of weird situation that we're in now, which is exactly what you described. Like, it's very similar to what happened with The Empty Man. The Empty Man being a much better movie, but like you can really tell that the studio is like, oh God, I have just had enough of this. I have had 7 years of meeting about chaos walking.
Yes.
Just get it out there. I don't care how. Yeah.
Just put it out there. Put literally $0 into advertising. This is now officially a loss. Like this is one of those things that we put on our books to prove that we didn't make a profit this year.
Yeah.
Yes, and it shows. All of what you just said shows in every single scene of this film. It is a dog. There's no better way to describe how a mangy, like a mutt, like not a lovable mutt either. Like we all love the cute mutt or whatever, the loyal mutt. This is nothing. This is the amount to which there is no sense made within the movie is in and of itself fascinating.
I think like my big problem with it is how completely lacking in imagination or creativity or insight or like charm or like anything outside of like
purpose.
I mean, like I can see purpose here, and like being honest, I have not read any of the Chaos Walking books. I'm not pretending to be an expert, but there are parts of this where I'm like, that's a vaguely interesting idea executed in the worst possible manner, and I'm like, is this something that came from the book? And the book is actually very good, but the movie has no idea what to do with this, because like you've got a host of interesting ideas, like this the idea that like
Actually, I suppose
yeah, that's plot. Yeah, you
we should do the plot, because like those watching, listening have probably barely heard of this movie and or never seen it, because nobody saw it. The premise of the movie is in the future, approximately 100 years in the future, humanity has landed on a different planet. This planet has a phenomenon called the noise that only affects males. And the noise means every thought you have is broadcast in bright, loud colors, in audio and visuals, to everyone that is around you. So everything you think puffs out of your head, and you can see the images, you can hear what you're thinking about, but it only affects males.
This will be important later, and immediately, and continuously.
But also not really. But also it doesn't really mean anything.
Well, I actually I think there's like a little nub of an idea there, in this idea of like the stereotype of the inscrutable woman, and the way in which men who are like grow up in this culture of being surrounded by being told how to behave like men, or internalizing how to behave like men, are being just in this stew of this idea of kind of what manliness is supposed to be, and the way in which that shapes and warps people and changes people. It's an interesting idea, and like you could see like this is what is this a metaphor for? Well, maybe it's a metaphor for like at several points, in case you don't get what it's a metaphor for, when characters are thinking about nothing, giant birds appear tweeting around their heads, just in case you don't get like what this could possibly be a metaphor in a series of books released in the 2010s about, you know, the idea of, well, your thoughts are just broadcast out into the world for everybody to see and judge you based upon, and create this kind of toxic stew that is possibly poisonous and radicalizing people and leading to unpleasant places. But all of this is subtext. None of this is actually developed. None of this goes in any way remotely interesting. It's just thrown out there, and nobody does anything with it.
That's the part, Darren. Nobody does anything with it. I'll agree with you that there are like chunks of really interesting ideas that could inform the narrative or the plot, that could give the movie a purpose, and it just doesn't. It just gosh darn doesn't do a thing with them at all whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, like, think about the idea. And again, like, this is where, you know, we joked about the idea of, like, the absurdity of hiring Charlie Kaufman, who literally wrote a movie about how you should not hire him to adapt things. And going, we want him to adapt this. But, like, I can see conceptually why this is a movie about like the idea of projecting what's inside someone's head out into the world, and how insane that is, and going, well, the writer of being John Malkovich, he's a surrealist.
Sure.
He might be able to make something of this that will make sense, and like, or not even maybe make sense, but will at least be interesting or engaging. And I think my big problem with this is that like instead it goes to like Doug Liman, who, and again, Doug Liman, really good director. Like, I love Go is a fantastic film. The Bourne Identity is a fantastic film. But Lyman is not a particularly imaginative director when it comes to visuals.
Sure.
So how do you represent this idea of people's thoughts like being made manifest? It's largely like those episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation where you just close in on like Deanna Troy's face, as people do in voiceover. I kind of talk about these weird things that overlap with one another. And it's like something from 90s television, and it really shouldn't be. Like, again, this looks like a movie that people spent money on when they made it, but all they did was spend money on like purple clouds that appear around Tom Holland's head while he does, and like the things that he thinks about are like really terrible because they're just exposition. Like at several points in the movie he's doing something, and like his thought process is, hope I don't screw this up. And it's like that's the worst possible way of using this device. He is an actor. I should be able to tell from his performance that he doesn't want to screw this up. You don't need to do ADR to tell me the character is thinking, I hope I don't screw this up. Sorry, that's my little rant there, but it's so unimaginative.
That is the perfect distillation of this, because the premise is interesting. And as I also, by the way, I didn't even watch a trailer for this before I watched the movie. I had literally zero idea what this movie was about. And, you know, in the opening, we see that Tom Holland has this ability, and everyone seemingly has this ability. And it's like, ooh, this is a really neat premise. Even early on in the movie, Tom Holland uses the idea that you can make visualizations out of your thoughts in a really interesting way, where he makes a giant snake appear and it startles his bully. And it's like, oh, okay, there are really unique, interesting concepts, even within the visuals, which must have cost a buttload.
Yeah.
We are talking about a ton of tracking, particle physics, like really, really neat looking effects. Even later in the film, we get some neat action sequence, like Tom Holland's climbing a really tall thing, and he imagines himself falling off of it, and we get to see himself come out of the purple mist and fall. It's like, one little neat visual thing, and I can point to maybe 2, 3 in the whole movie that are neat visual things.
But most of the time, it's just characters who are looking insecure, saying, "Man, I really hope people don't notice how insecure I am." And it's like, it's like they're reading the slug lines in the script. You know, the bits that go between the dialogue, and it's like a book on tape, is what it feels like at times. And it's like, that's not what this should be. And it's a shame because the cast is freaking phenomenal, and a lot of this is just timing. A lot of this is down to the fact it was made in 2016, and all of these people were very affordable in 2016. but things like, say, Mads Mikkelsen playing the mayor of the community, the mayor of Prentice Town, this community that is made up exclusively of men for reasons that are never made entirely clear until you realize exactly why that would be, because Mads Mikkelsen is your mayor. And then you kind of get like Damien Bitcher playing kind of like one of, you know, Todd's adoptive fathers, for example, and he's fantastic as well. You've got Cynthia Erivo, who was at that stage, again, quick shout out to Bad Times at the Royale, another actor who she did Widows around the same time as well, and she was really bursting out from Broadway. And like, but nothing sticks here. Like they're just standing around spouting nonsense at one another. It's really, really frustrating.
In Purple Mist, they're just spouting nonsense in Purple Mist, like,
which is my least favorite Prince album.
Purple Mist, Purple Mist. Here's like beyond all of this, like beyond the lack of imagination that we see on camera, the way you can tell that this has passed through 1.5 billion different writers and kept each of the 1.5 billion snippets of each of these writers is that there is no internal consistency to the movie's logic. For example, Tom Holland's character is really like at odds with this power, right? Like this power really bothers him. He wants to control it. He wants to not have it. Like he almost seems embarrassed by this power. Keep in mind that Tom Holland is a character who was born into this, and everyone he has ever known has had this power. Why is it weird for him?
And more than that, the fact that like the older generation are the people who arrived, and this was strange for them as well.
Right.
He has never known anything but this. And in fact, like the movie, like again, this is the thing where you talk about it feeling like there are different writers who have different approach to this story. And it's like, we didn't ever come up with one consistent one. We just took scenes from this guy's version, scenes from this guy's, and popped them in beside each other. Like there's a moment where like Todd, when and the plot of the movie involves this colony that's made up entirely of men, and then this kind of study craft arrives, and Daisy Ridley's on there, and like he sees Daisy Ridley coming out, and like they encounter one another very briefly, and she darts into the woods, and like he's like, I saw this guy arrive, and he didn't have any noise around him, and like at that moment, Mads Mikkelsen as the mayor is like, oh, find her quickly, and it's like, she's a girl, and it's like it's never entirely clear how naive Todd is supposed to be. Like you get a sense that there's one version of the script where nobody has explained that women are a thing to him, but you also get a sense that there's another version where like he's had the birds and bees conversation, and it's like, oh yeah, they don't really, you know, women aren't a thing in this world anymore, but just so you're aware, this is how women work. And it never seems entirely consistent which of the two it's going for, you know?
Well, very similarly with that same sequence. So yes, you're right. Daisy Ridley is part of the second wave of settlers on this alien planet. and her ship crashes. She's the only survivor of the crash. So the first time she and Tom Holland interact is when she is stealing stuff from his barn.
Yeah.
Now, why she is stealing stuff from his barn, why she then runs away from him, and why she never announces herself to the locals, even though literally that was her
purpose.
mission.
That's her job. Yeah, that's like what she's there to do.
That was never explained why she decided not to announce herself and why steal and not, you know, nothing makes much sense. We are introduced to an evil character, the evil native aliens, the what are they called?
I don't even think
the Shimmer.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that they are named, but they're just They're like, again, the whole thing is that like it's also a metaphor for the Wild West, because again, the way in which you're introduced to Prentice, who set up Prentice Town on this new world that these people have arrived in. He's wearing a hat and riding a horse and carrying a space gun, because this movie has to be PG-13 as well. So it's like a revolver, but it shoots like lasers out of it. It's and like obviously as part of that, the metaphor is that there have to be an indigenous population, and they have a conversation like later on where Ridley's like, "Oh, by the way, we are the aliens," in case you don't get the subtext. But it never quite like coheres into anything.
Nope. No. So like the native aliens were blamed for killing all the women. We meet them exactly once, and then they are never mentioned ever again.
Yeah.
Like, and by once, I mean, there is an alien in possibly 3 shots. That's what we get. That's the amount of alien we get.
But look, the alien wasn't available for reshoots. He had his own franchise commitments, Jack. I mean, you can't be on, like, let's not be unfair to the movie here.
The Shimmer reminds me of a Doctor Who cactus alien, right? I forget what they're called. It's something like that. Oh, the grungers, the polywops. It you know, nothing matters. Nothing matters within the movie. How and so and I like, as soon as we get to the end and I see the credit that this is based off of a series of novels, everything started to click for me why this is so broken. Adapting something where you are supposed to be reading a character's thoughts
makes sense in prose
into a visual medium is difficult in and of itself. Once that is the plot hook of the books, it gets significantly more difficult. I do wonder. I wonder if that was a fun, like, early twist in the books. Is we're reading a character's thoughts, and then we discover that the other characters can also read their thoughts. And it's like, ooh, that's a fun twist. That's something that wouldn't necessarily work in a movie.
Yeah, I mean, like, you need, and again, like, this is the thing where I kind of understand why you went to Kaufman. Even I understand why you went to somebody outside of your regular pool of writers, even if I don't understand why you went to Kaufman. But like, because you need somebody with a strong, weird sensibility to do something like this, because this can't be the Hunger Games. It can't be the Maze Runner. It can't be Divergent. It has, like, the concept of it demands something like a little bit avant-garde and weird and odd, and like you need to go to somebody like Tarsem Singh, the guy who did like The Cell or The Fall or whatever. Somebody who would never get a job like this, because like if it goes wrong, and it probably will go wrong, it will be horrific, but if it goes right, it might actually work, as opposed to like Doug Liman, where like if it goes wrong, it'll probably be watchable, and if it goes right, it'll probably be watchable.
See, and like I think, I mean, there's a ton of problem within the writing itself, absolutely. But I think that it has more to do with all of the separate entities that they tried to mush together. What they needed to do was a clean slate. Once any one single writer could have made something better than this horrible congealing conglomeration. What you also needed was a director who could handle the trippy visual nature. See, I don't think you need Charlie Kaufman. I think you need Michel Gondry.
Oh, wow. Yes. That I would love to see.
Yes.
And there is no way a studio would ever greenlight that. There's like absolutely no way.
Absolutely no way. But if like, let's say, and again, you know, we're not going to dig too big into the Marvel.
Oh my God.
What do you got?
like the mayor would be played by Christoph Waltz from The Green Hornet. Oh my god.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If you gave Michel Gondry a team to handle, say, action sequences, right? If you plugged him into the Marvel machine, gave him a little bit of leeway, you could have really interesting visual design, and possibly a movie that makes sense even in Michel Gondry's dream logic land. Because all of his movies make sense within the dream logic that is Michel Gondry.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, if you don't like a Gondry film, it's not because it doesn't make sense or because it has plot holes. It's because you're not on the wavelength of it. And I mean, I say that as somebody who is occasionally not on the wavelength of it. Like, my problem with Be Kind Rewind isn't that the movie makes no sense. It's that I'm just not into this. This whimsy is not my vibe, you know?
Oh, you monster! You
I actually do. I do like
monster.
Be Kind Rewind. I was just trying to think of a Gondry film I didn't like. I suppose Green Hornet probably works.
But
Yeah,
like Green Hornet was a paycheck. That's fine.
Yeah. Like Green Hornet is the problem of a halfway studio, like Michel Gondry film.
Yes.
Which is kind of like what I worried this would turn out to be, but at least it would be interesting. Which is the worst thing you could say about a bad movie. Like the other version would probably also be terrible, but at least it would be interesting.
Right? It would be fun. And really that's the biggest, like the biggest sin this movie commits. Like there is a ton of inconsistencies and characters making decisions that make no logical sense, but really it's just dull. It's just an overall, like it's flaccid, I think is a perfect word for this. There's nothing nothing vibrant. It goes through the paces.
Yeah, I mean, like Mads Mikkelsen is there and he's doing what he can, but like again, you get the sense that he's looked at it and figured out exactly how much energy he needs to give it and nothing more.
Literally nothing more, which you have to respect because, you know, you don't want to give your time to something that's not going to give it back. So,
I part of me wants the Mads Mikkelsen like the real problem with this is that there's no Mads Mikkelsen publicity tour. Like, because if you've ever watched Interview with Mikkelsen, he's amazing. Yeah. Like when he was asked, like he did like "Bitch Better Have My Money," the Rihanna song, and he was asked like what his opinion of Rihanna's music was. He was like, well, I've never actually listened to a Rihanna song, but my kids said I had to do it and it would be cool, so I did. So I guess my favorite Rihanna song is "Bitch Better Have My Money" because, well, I'm the bitch. So yeah, I really want the Mads Mikkelsen kind of publicity tour for Chaos Walking.
Yeah, I like that. I like that indeed. All right, so that's Chaos Walking. Don't see it. Don't waste your time. It's very much not worth it. Even for like a hate watch, there's nothing to lock on to hate to. So
yeah, there's no energy.
So why don't we now switch to talk about quite literally the best of the best, the movies that have been nominated for this year's Oscar for Best Picture. We've been picking at them slowly here and there, which is something I've been enjoying overall. And you know what? I've decided I'm just not going to watch Mank. I don't care. I just don't care. I don't have it in me. I'm not going to watch it. I don't want it to win. I don't have the energy.
I like that. Like that's where you draw the line. Not Trial of Chicago 7. It's like no, Mank.
I also haven't seen Trial of Chicago 7. Yeah, both of those. Fuck them.
They go in the hole.
They go in the hole. If they win, fine, whatever. I don't care. I don't care about them enough to watch them. That's my.
I like Mank. I like again. Like I'm the target audience for Mank.
Yes.
I'm the dude who likes like old films. It's like yes, this is fan service for me. Give me the fan service. Feed me. Like I freely admit that Mank is very much a film fan, like a stereotypical like pretentious cinephiles kind of thing. It's a pretentious cinephile. I'm like, I own it. I'm proud of it. I freely admit that. Stacey's descriptions as starring Gary Oldman as an old man.
What else do you need to know about Mank? So we were able to get through a couple more before, because the Oscars are next week Sunday. I believe
the 26th, I believe. So yes.
Yes. Is that correct? I want to say. Oh, do we have another week? Oh fuck! I gotta watch Mank, don't I?
Well, no, because you haven't watched Nomadland yet, so you can.
We can watch Nomadland. That's right.
And The Father. We haven't done The Father either, so you can do Nomadland and The Father.
Oh, that's Olivia. No, wait, that's Olivia Colman. I like Olivia Colman.
I love the pitch. It's just like.
I don't want to, depress an old man. Fine. I thought it was the 18th. Hold on, we have to take a small Google break.
Okay, well, okay, well, as I recall, and again, this is one of those moments where like the cultural calendar lines up perfectly. Originally, Mortal Kombat was supposed to release on the 18th, but they pushed it back so that like the weekend that the Oscars are being announced, you will also have Mortal Kombat arriving in cinemas on HBO Max. So you have both high and low culture arriving simultaneously.
Heck yeah. So the Oscars are April 25th. So not
Okay,
next
so it wasn't too long.
Sunday, but the Sunday after next. All right. So I'll watch No Man Land. Maybe we'll do No Man
I love
Land.
how grudgingly that it's fine. I'll watch it. No,
Man, watch the movies.
it's not Mank.
No
Yeah,
Mank.
it's not Mank.
I'm not watching Mank. I'm not watching Trial of
You
Chicago
can't
7.
make me watch Mank.
I'm
Yeah,
not
you
gonna
can't
do
make-
it. You can't make me watch Mank. Here's the thing, Darren. Before we get into the movies we're actually going to talk about, while I respect Golden Age, Silver Age cinema so much, I actually don't like it all that much. I am a person who has attention issues, and those movies are very, very slow.
No, like again, I'll freely admit, like again, as much as I joke about me being a pretentious cinephile, I'm not actually a pretentious cinephile. I'm not a big fan of golden era Hollywood. Like I love, and again, this is where I've took off the pretentious cinephile hat and I'm gonna put it back on. Big fan of like German expressionism and silent cinema and kind of pre-code cinema. Not a huge fan of like what many people in my profession consider to be the golden age of Hollywood.
Sure.
Films from the 30s and 40s, in large part because of things like the Hays Code, where it's like, I mean, I like subtext as much as the next man, but like at a certain point, like there's no point in doing it if you have to like go through and say, no, audience, this is wrong, just in case you don't get. There's no moral ambiguity in what you're seeing. I'm just going to explain very clearly that what you're seeing is wrong. So criminals never prosper, just to be absolutely clear. And these social values are absolutely and unapologetically like unimpeachable. So I don't know why it's British if it's American golden age cinema, but like that's just the vibe I get from it.
Yeah, well, I suppose we would hire a British actor to deliver that kind of meaty
statement.
Yeah, meaty statement. Absolutely.
No, I mean, like, there are obviously movies from the period that I love. Like, Wizard of Oz is one of my favorite movies ever, for example. And, I mean, I love a lot of James Cagney movies and Public Enemy and stuff like that. But, like, when I think of, like, cinema that I love, I generally jump forward to either New Hollywood in the 70s because I'm that kind of an obnoxious cinema bro, or I go back to, like, silent cinema or kind of German expressionism because I just like weird angles and strange shit. That's what I want. I'm here for the strange shit.
I'm here for the weird angles and strange shit. Hell yeah, Darren. I love it. Yeah. So
Thank you for taking my TED Talk.
No, okay, great. That wraps up my thoughts on why I'm not watching Mank. Perfect. Which obviously leads right into Judas and the Black Messiah. So, obviously.
Neatly, like with a button on it. It's perfect.
Obviously, neatly, rightly with a button on it. Obviously, it's a very good movie. That's it. It's a very good movie. That's where you start with. It's been nominated for Best Picture for a very good reason. To me, the thing that elevates it is, of course, all of the performances. You can't throw a rock and hit a bad performance in this movie. Why I'm throwing rocks at the movie, I cannot tell you.
Just like you were aiming at Mank and you just accidentally hit Judas and the Black Messiah because it was standing next to it in the lineup.
Wait, I'm hitting Mank. I'm hitting Mank.
Like this is the thing where like I think we've had a number of guests on the past who actually like adore Judas and the Black Messiah. I think we were planning on having like Lee on.
Lee was supposed to come back. And, unfortunately, he had a schedule change at the last minute, so he couldn't join us for Judas Talk. Yeah.
And Lee adores this movie, and like I'm actually kind of a little bit. I'm really sad that I don't get to hear Lee talk about it that much because I like this movie. I really like this movie a lot. For pretty much the same reason you did. The cast is fantastic. I also think it's like an interesting addition to the modern, like socially conscious kind of film genre that we've seen. Because like obviously anybody who's watched the Oscars know that like important in inverted commas movies are part and parcel of award ceremonies. These movies that deal with kind of hefty social issues and big ideas and big themes. So it kind of like, you can go back and you think of things of like, think of the death penalty movies that were very huge in the 90s.
Yeah.
Things like, for example, Dead Man Walking, things like The Chamber and stuff like that. And I think what's really interesting is that in the past couple of years, 3 or 4 years, we've seen cinema get a bit bolder with those and to take a step back and like actually understand that these social issue movies exist in a wider social and political context. And like I think of things like, say, Just Mercy starring Michael B. Jordan, which is really, really good. And I actually really like it's a death penalty movie, but it's also a death penalty movie that goes, well, you know what? The death penalty issue in America is kind of inseparable from the whole race issue, just based
Mm.
on things like demographics and sentencing.
Mhm.
It's impossible to talk about that without talking about this as well. So I know that we had a whole bunch of movies about like white guys and the death penalty in the 90s, and how like the death penalty is always bad no matter who's being affected, but really we kind of need to acknowledge that it's just part of like a larger parcel of issues that we need to kind of delve into.
Mhm.
And I like that there's been this wave of kind of socially conscious cinema in the past couple of years. And I think Judas and the Black Messiah is one of those movies. I think Black Klansman is another that's actually said, okay, well, look, if you are going to do an issue driven award season movie, you need to take a step back and you need to realize that these problems are not just, well, it's terrible that this thing happened and we can all reflect on how terrible it was that this thing happened. Instead, it's like, no, this thing happened and it was part of a larger pattern of behavior, doesn't exist in a vacuum. And we need to acknowledge that that larger pattern and that non-vacuum is something that we need to address.
Mhm.
So I'm really, really glad to see movies like Judas and the Black Messiah getting made. And I think it does a rather good job. And I agree entirely. The casting is phenomenal here. The two leads, Lakeith Stanfield and Daniel Kaluuya, inexplicably both nominated in Best Supporting Actor. Like I love the idea that like Jesse Plemons woke up on the morning of award nominations and discovered that he was the lead in Judas and the Black Messiah. It's like, well, it's good to know that, I guess. Everybody else was just supporting. But like, I think the cast is fantastic. But like, the problem with Judas and the Black Messiah for me, and it's one of those things that happens with movies that are really good, but I have problems with, is that whenever I end up talking about them, I end up talking more about my problems with them than I do about what I love about them. And a
Mm.
couple of my problems with Judas and the Black Messiah, things like, as much as I love Kaluuya and Stanfield in the role, I think they're too old. Like I think Fred Hampton was 21 years old when this is set, and like
Yes.
Kaluuya is very much past that without wanting to like age shame him on the air. Like Keith Stanfield is almost like a decade older than William O'Neill was when he was doing this as well. And I think like when we talk about Judas and the Black Messiah, the name of the film, and again, it's taken from actual quotes from J. Edgar Hoover, played by Martin Sheen, under a shed load of makeup. But like this idea of Judas and the Black Messiah being a story of betrayal. And I think when I was watching Judas and the Black Messiah, I didn't necessarily feel the personal connection that I expected to the characters and the betrayal. I felt like this was a very important movie that was dealing with very important, very weighty themes, but I didn't necessarily feel like these were real people, if that makes sense, or that they had kind of a relationship to one another, and that the betrayal was in any way personal. It was instead one that was kind of forced by the state, and it was a systemic problem. And I get that that's the point of the movie,
Mhm.
but I kind of had difficulty engaging with that emotionally. And I think while I respect that, the film also tries to have its cake and eat it, because it tries to get that personal interest idea in there by focusing on, say, the relationship between Fred Hampton and his partner, Deborah Johnson, who was his girlfriend at the time that the whole incident in the movie occurred. I'm being very vague here for spoiler reasons, but but I feel like that stuff didn't connect with me, because it felt very much like somebody had said, okay, well, we need a personal angle in the movie, so let's give him a screen partner and a love interest
Mm.
and kind of like a family situation, and that makes it personal. And I ended up sitting at a bit of an odd distance from it, which is odd because I really appreciate it. I think it's very well made. I think the casting is phenomenal, and I think it's dealing with something that is amazing to see a major studio movie grappling with on screen.
Absolutely, and in unfortunately, and forever, incredibly timely as we talk about the overreaching authority of government officials. What I will say to that, and a quick talk about a comment. No, Jesse Plemons was not nominated for Best Actor.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Sorry. That was apologies. Sorry. That was a joke
That
on
was
my
it.
part. Like
It was a
that
joke because both of the leads of the movie were nominated for Best Supporting. Even though, like, I guess I would assume that Stanfield was the lead of the movie. That's
because he's Judas. He's first in the title.
he's Judas. Like I would assume he's the leading actor. I bet if you broke down the screen time, he probably gets by a hair the most percentage out of anyone in the movie.
He also gets a big arc, and he gets like the big drama scenes. And like
Yes.
again, those drama scenes are really, really,
And
really good.
and see, like, to your specific problem, and obviously, like, if you don't connect with anyone, like, that's a very personal thing. Art is subjective. To me, like, like Bill O'Neill, who is played by Lakeith Stanfield, maybe.
Uh, I've probably been saying both. I apologize to listeners. I jump back and forth. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, sorry.
The his character like I locked on very hard with him. They go to great pains to kind of show all like his arc in great Judas's arc in great detail, how like the slippery slope that led him. Obviously this is a based on true events, so people probably know what happens. Obviously his name is Judas. People hopefully,
And the movie's called The Black Messiah. Like, I mean, one gets a sense that you know the arc of the story of Judas and the Messiah, and you gotta like fill in the blank. And to be fair, like the movie's aware of that. Like,
Yeah.
it's a tragedy. It's going for this big, grand, epic, tragic thing.
Yes.
So I don't think it's a spoiler to suggest that maybe William O'Neill ends up betraying Fred Hampton, the chairman of the Black Panthers, in Chicago. So
Right.
like, I think that's fair game.
And I love how they were able to walk us through how a Judas becomes a Judas, every single step in painstaking detail. And as someone who is not necessarily familiar with this story, it was a heartbreaking story all the way through, for many different reasons. There is one part, like if I am going to be critical of the movie, I would say that it's not very visually engaging. That's one of my, and that's a very standard criticism of any kind of biopic out there, is usually you concentrate on the characters, on the relationships. You don't have a lot of leftover time for imagery.
Yeah. And I mean, like, again, biographies generally unfold in a recognizable real world, unless we're talking about something like, say, Mishima by Paul Schrader, which if you haven't seen Mishima, you should definitely seek out. Or things like I'm Still Here, the Bob Dylan biopic, where they swap Bob Dylan actors for each of the kind of roles. But generally speaking, biopics unfold in a world that is recognizably real and grounded. So yeah, I accept that. And I think that, like, particularly when you're doing this story, which is, as you point out, not a well-known story. I didn't know the details of it either before I sat down to watch the movie. I think you have a duty and a responsibility when you're telling that, particularly when you're doing something that is, as you point out, quite politically fraught, as this is, to be honest about it. I think that if you were trying to stylize it, you would run the risk of obscuring the actual point that you're making. If you weren't doing this kind of like, and not docudrama, because that's not entirely fair. It's not like Battle of Algiers or something like that. But if you weren't doing like a grounded take on this, it would probably feel a bit flippant or a bit subversive. Now I say that thinking that like Black Klansman is one of the best, sort of like history movies of the past decade. But again, that not everybody is Spike Lee, and not everybody should be Spike Lee. And I immediately feel uncomfortable that like the first place I went when I thought of Judas and the Black Messiah was Spike Lee Black Klansman. But that's just because Black Klansman is one of the great historical movies of the past decade, to be honest. But yeah, sure. No, I understand why it's grounded. I get why it's grounded.
Absolutely. And like I said, that's why it's like it's a I want to call it like a basic criticism, especially like when we kind of look at the other, best picture nominees here. It's a very basic criticism, and it's not a harsh criticism because of all those things that you just said. They are concentrating on the story, how Judas became Judas, why the Black Messiah is the Black Messiah. That is the goal of the movie, and they achieved everything they set out for in folds, tenfolds, kings.
Yeah. And I mean, there are some, like, I mean, I say that, like, I really, really like this movie. There's some amazing scenes in this movie. Like, again, the sequence where, Lil Rel Howery shows up, like, just for one scene. And if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what that scene is. And it's probably, I shouldn't mention what that scene is, but that sequence is just so fantastic in terms of, and again, we mentioned about the movie not being stylized, and it isn't overly stylized, but in that sequence, you feel like you're inside the head of O'Neill. You understand why his perception has been messed with to the extent that it is, why he feels like he can't trust why he makes the decisions that he does, and how he feels like he has no choice but to make those decisions. And again, it's all communicated very confidently, very stylish. Again, Shaka King is the director. And again, I don't want to be too harsh in terms of talking about it not being overly visual stylized. It's notable that King has done a lot of television work. His previous film was Newlyweds, I think, in 2013, but he's done work on, say, shows like High Maintenance, Shrill, The A.D. Bryan Show, Random Acts of Finance, and People of Earth, actually, as well. So, like, I imagine that a lot of the kind of groundedness of the film or the lack of heavy stylization is probably a result of that kind of television experience,
Hmm.
because it has that kind of feel of a really good HBO kind of television show or movie, perhaps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, and it's like it's so worth a watch. It is so
Yeah,
worth a
absolutely.
nomination. And not necessarily my favorite so far, but an incredible film if you want to watch something that will make you feel I mean, you're not going to feel good things, but you will feel after you watch this movie. Yeah, phenomenal film.
Yeah, and again, fantastic cast as well, and
Mm.
yeah, and like again, the story that needs to be told again. But I worry that this is the thing where it's like Nomadland. We're going to talk about Nomadland next week, and I'm going to seem like I'm Debbie fucking Downer. Talking about how much I have these problems with Nomadland. It's actually no, it's genuinely a really good movie that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I quite enjoy. But it's just whenever the conversation comes around, it's like these are the things that kind of gnaw at me. But
Mm.
yeah, no, it's really, really, really good. And shout out to, we mentioned Kahlua, we mentioned Stanfeld. Plemons as well is actually really good. Like Plemons, and I joked about him being the lead actor. He's not the lead actor. But like the way in which he presents, like he's the handler character.
Mm.
He's the guy who manipulates O'Neill into becoming Judas.
Mm.
And like the interplay between them and the way in which the film characterizes him as well, it avoids a lot of the cliches that you might expect in a story like this. And you do get that interesting. It's not just like a push, it's a pull as well. I like, again, I think it's very, very well made.
Oh, the build and release of tension in a story that you could have already known it
Well, I
should
mean, the title tells you the ending. Like the
this is the
title,
thing.
like
Like some people will know this story already. Some people will know
yeah,
how the story ends. Some people will even know the beats of the movie, and the way they are able to manipulate that tension still is remarkable.
yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, good.
I would agree with that.
All good things to say. All good things to say. Performances. All performances. They are they both. Wait, are they both nominated for best supporting?
Yes, inexplicably, yes. They did try to. They campaigned. I'm trying to remember if they campaigned for Kahlua in lead. I believe probably because Kahlua is a bigger actor. Because Kahlua obviously did Get Out a couple of years ago, and so he has probably a better cachet with the
Sure.
Academy. So I think they pushed him for lead. But then the Oscar voters do what the Oscar voters do, which is they just nominate them in whatever category they feel like. They did something similar with, what was her name, Kate Winslet, when she actually won her Oscar for The Reader, where the studios, that she had two movies out that year. She had The Reader and she had Revolutionary Road. And the studios agreed among themselves that they would push, I think, Revolutionary Road as a lead and The Reader as supporting,
Uh-huh.
in the hopes of getting her into two categories, in the
Ooh.
hope that at least one, if not two of those, would win. But I think in that case, the Academy voters were at least smart enough or honest enough to realize, nope, she's a lead in The Reader, and that's going in. That's the one that we're taking. So it's almost like an inverse of what happened here, where you because you kind of wonder, in order to get a nomination for two of them,
Hmm.
like presumably nobody put them both down on the same supporting actor form. Like presumably, if you were nominating both of them, you had one of them as lead and one of them as supporting.
Sure.
So I find that, like, again, and this is one of
And
the
so
things where
enough,
you look at.
like half of the people swapped them up. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like, that's what, like, did they do like a weird swapping thing? Because again, obviously, if you're nominated, I think that the Oscar rules are, if you're nominated, if you get nominations in two categories, whichever one you got more nominations in, that's the one that your role gets nominated for. You can
Sure.
be nominated as like lead and supporting in the same year, but for two different films. You can't obviously be nominated for the same role because that would be cheating. But like when they're assigning roles, I think it's whichever one got the most. So if the role got more votes for supporting, then that's where you go. But again, and I do wonder how that affects their chances now, because obviously any pooling for this movie is going to get split along those
Ooh,
lines,
yeah.
in terms of kind of like the supporting
Did
actor
did
nominees.
they accidentally split the ticket? Did they make a political mistake?
That's the question. You do, like, again, I am wondering like how this is going to work, because I think the supporting actor category. I'm trying to think who's the favorite in the supporting actor category. I'm literally just checking this now because I am a professional.
Actor in a, okay, so we have actor in a supporting role: Sacha Baron Cohen for The Trial of Chicago
Oh
7,
dear God.
Daniel Kaluuya in Judas and the Black Messiah, Leslie Odom Jr. in One Night in Miami, Paul Raci for Sound of Metal, and Lakeith Stanfield for Judas and the Black Messiah. I've now said it both ways, just in case. So those are our nominees. Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
This is a really interesting one-off video. You and I should work on a great one-off video on exactly how this happened. Like this is like the minutia of the Academy rules are so weird here to have both of them in supporting roles. That should not happen, Academy. That truly one of Lakeith is very clearly
technically
the lead.
one of them has to be a lead. Like
you can't have a movie of all supporting actors. Someone has to be the lead, right? Interesting. Interesting. Very, very interesting. A lot of ooh, by the way, like Paul Raci was so good in Sound of Metal too, which is just like ooh.
I think Kahlua is technically the favorite. I'm just checking some odds here now. Again, this is not gambling advice. I feel the need to disavow this is gambling advice. This podcast does not endorse gambling on the Oscar races. Sure. But checking some various odds on like sites like Betfair, it seems like Kahlua is the favorite.
Really?
Sacha Baron Cohen is second favorite. And you'll notice that Lakeith Stanfield is least favorite. So obviously people are guessing on how that split ticket is working.
Okay, here's if I'm going to be like a super both of their performances were incredible, by the way.
Really great, yeah.
Really great. Oh, that feels like though like you're throwing a baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, no, it really does feel like you've been put in like a weird Sophie's Choice situation, and they're counting on like they've done the math. They figured that like there's enough support behind this movie that you can get 2 nominees into this category, which means that there's enough support behind it that you can win that category if you all agree on which one you're backing. And it looks based on like the rankings, because like the rankings looking at Betfair here are like Kahlua, Sacha Baron Cohen, Leslie Odom Jr., Paul Raci, and then at the very bottom Lakeith Stanfield. It really seems like, okay, we've looked at the board, we figured like Kahlua is our best bet. Sorry, Lakeith.
And if I'm going to be a pedantic fuck, which I am, as it turns out, I do think that Kahlua was the better supporting actor only because Stanfield wasn't a supporting actor. So technically that's true. I don't like it. I don't like it.
Well, yeah, at least they're not splitting the vote, which I guess is something. not that I imagine that's like great comfort to Lakeith Stanfield. Right. He's fantastic, to be clear. But I can't imagine he's sitting there going, "Well, hey, look, at least I'm not splitting the vote, right?"
Right. I mean, did we need another for Anthony Hopkins? Did we need that for the father? Come on, get him out of there. Let's do a hot swap, a last minute hot swap. Is that possible?
Well, you realize if you move, I suppose actually, if you move Kahlua out, Baron Cohen becomes the favorite for trial. That was my big fear.
Oh.
My big fear was that Baron Cohen was going to take this category, but I'm looking at the odds, and I'm like, okay, I can live with.
No, I'm saying we move Stanfield to leading and Anthony Hopkins to supporting. I haven't seen the father, but let's just assume. He's supporting.
Then you're moving him into a category with Chadwick Boseman, and nothing. Yeah, that's not going to work.
Right.
Yeah,
fuck.
And I mean, I say that thinking Boseman's performance was fantastic as well, but nobody else is winning that Oscar.
That's fair.
Darren says in a recording that's going to be played like at my funeral when it turns out that, oh my God, surprise, it actually went to Riz Ahmed.
Ooh, I mean, I haven't seen the movie, so I cannot comment. But you're probably right. You're probably right. All right, let us move on now to one of the biggest surprises for me movies that I've watched recently. A movie that has done such a mathematically good job at subverting my expectations, from the trailer to every act of the movie, to every performance of the movie, to the ending of the movie. I didn't see any of this coming. I loved it all. Let's talk about Promising Young Woman. We will do our very best to be spoiler-free as long as we can, and we will tell you when we will spoil it, because we are about, in a little bit, we are going to spoil Promising Young Woman, because we have to.
Yeah. And you should definitely see this, by the way. I'm going to add my second to Jack here. This was one of my favorite movies I saw last year.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite movies I've seen this year. If you can go in blind, if it's possible to go in blind, like in the middle of April 2021, go in blind and watch this movie. I adore it.
And actually, real quick, because I don't want to do this after we do spoiler talk, before we get into that, do you have a favorite? What's your personal best picture so far? Knowing that, like, I haven't seen all of them yet, but I have a personal winner.
Of the nominees,
Yeah.
this one, easily. This one walks.
Promising Young Woman, that's yours.
That's it. There's no competition, and I mean, like, outside of that, it's maybe Minari and maybe Mank, but this is, yeah, I know Darren says Mank. Darren says Mank.
Of course, yeah.
But this,
I am not surprised at all that you love Mank so much. Don't worry.
I know. I'm willing to own it. But Promising Young Woman takes it in a walk. Like, of the nominees, there's nothing. Like, I saw this. Remember cinemas? Do people remember what cinemas were? It's been that long.
Yeah.
But I saw this in a cinema in March last year at the Dublin Film Festival, and it was an incredible experience because, and again, no spoilers, but the experience that you described is very much the experience that I had watching it the first time, and everybody in the cinema had watching it the first time.
I wish I could be in a theater for this movie. Absolutely.
Because if you've seen the trailer, it looks like a standard rape revenge movie. It is not a standard rape revenge movie. It's not The Brave One. It's not Coraline Farragut's Revenge. It's not anything like that. And watching it in a cinema crowded with people for the first time and having them do the thing that I'm doing, which is figuring out how to react to it. There are moments where you're not sure if you should laugh or if you should gasp. You're not entirely sure whether what you're seeing is something that you should be comfortable with. You're not entirely sure whether what you're seeing means what you think it means. And the movie, like, one of the things the movie does really well, which I adore, is it makes you wait. It will show you things and it will imply things, and it won't tell you exactly what those things mean until 10 or 20 minutes later. So you have to sit with it as an audience member and go, well, if that is what it looked like, how do I feel about it? And how do I feel about the characters who are involved in that? And that's an incredible thing to do. And it's an incredible thing to do in a room full of people. And the second time I saw it was part of the Oscar qualifying run for various awards or whatever that I vote for, because I'm the kind of asshole who votes for Mank and stuff. So I saw it as part of its award qualifying run with my family over Christmas. It was the Mooney family Christmas movie. And I had seen it before, obviously, so I knew what was coming. But again, being in that room and getting the reaction from it. And like, one of the things that I've actually been really impressed with and kind of like restore my faith in humanity about like watching Promising Young Woman is that this is a movie that doesn't offer audiences what they think they're getting going in. And by and large, the audiences that I've sat with are actually like, I didn't get what I thought I wanted from this. What I got was probably more interesting. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. And even now, a year later, I'm kind of like, I think I know how I feel about it. I'm not entirely sure. But it's like, that's an incredible thing with a movie. And to have an audience just go, or ooh, or just like chill, or the silence. Like when you're watching a movie and a crowd just goes silent. That's an incredible thing. And it happens at several points during this. So yeah, no, the Promising Young Woman is, of the best picture nominees, it's the one for me. It's my personal favorite. It would be the one that I would vote for if I had a car.
Sure.
And that almost excuses me for putting Mank second.
I wish we could just wrap up right there because that's so funny. But no, and I guess I'll get into mine next week after I watch a couple more of them. For me, so far, it's Sound of Metal, as I think
Good
that
choice.
exemplifies all of that. Sound of Metal is all of the artistry to their technically best, I believe. That being said, obviously I'm not seeing two of them, and I'm watching two more for next week. So.
I hear Mank only has like one audio channel. That's like half the audio channel that you need to be a good movie.
Like, it has like at least 8 more colors in it than Mank, so it can't be Mank. No, but obviously we can get into a little bit more of that next week, because you did such a great lead up into Promising Young Woman, which is exactly that, the artistry of subverting expectations within the movie is phenomenal, is absolutely textbook. Watch this movie and learn how to do this. It plays with you and you start to get into its rhythm, and then it kicks it on its head and says, "Got you again, bitch." And it did. It got me so many times.
Like one of the big recurring motifs in the film is the character staring at the camera. Like the character and like it's not like a, oh well, let me tell you about how I got into this crazy situation I'm in kind of. It's not, sort of like House of Cards narration or anything like that. It's characters addressing one another, but the way in which the shots are framed, and again, it's this very Kubrickian symmetrical kind of composition. The composition here is absolutely, again, you talk in terms of craft. The cinematography is absolutely beautiful. The way in which the shots are designed, it's got this kind of like Instagram chic aesthetic, which plays into what you mentioned there. No, but it's very much, again, you mentioned subverting expectations, because this looks like your best friend's Instagram feed, but then when you get underneath the surface, it is anything but. But like there are these moments throughout where like characters are like constantly, they're symmetrical, but they're standing in the center of the frame and they're looking at the camera and they're talking through the camera to another character. Obviously, it's a two-shot conversation, but the movie is very clear that the character of Cassandra, and again, she's called Cassandra in case you don't get the subtext, in that she speaks truth and nobody listens to her, but she's staring at you as an audience member and asking you what you're comfortable with as an audience member. And again, this is a moment from the trailer. It's not a spoiler. The opening scene of the movie finds three douchey bros at a bar talking amongst themselves and noticing that a woman across the way is blackout drunk. Two of the guys are like, hey, she should know better at her age. I mean, somebody's going to take advantage. And the other guy's like, look, you guys stop being assholes and like borderline sexual predators. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to check she's okay. And he does, and it's like, okay, how are you going to get a ride? It's like, oh, I want an app, but you got no phone. Oh, I'll call a taxi for both of us. And coincidentally, they all end up back at his place, and he's kind of kissing and making out with her. She's barely conscious. He's plying a drink into her hand. He's throwing her on the bed, and she's meekly protesting, stop, what are you doing? Stop what you're doing. And I think Emerald Fennell, the director and writer, has said, like, this is a scene that you have seen countless times in God knows how many romantic comedies. And I mean, like, think of Observe and Report has a very similar sequence quite recently. But going back to things like Revenge of the Nerds, where it's like, oh, look at this dude, he's got this sexy lady, and, they're drunk and they're having fun. It's grand. And the scene, and I love it, the music, just this violin kind of scare chord starts. And Carey Mulligan opens her eyes, and she stares up at the ceiling. And there's not a mirror on the ceiling. The guy's not on the ceiling. We as an audience and a camera are looking down at us. And she's staring right at us. And she's asking, what are you doing? And repeatedly throughout the film, there are moments where the film goes, as an audience, what exactly do you want from this movie? And what you want from this movie, what does that mean? And what does that say about the stories we're able to tell? And more importantly, is what you want from this movie what is best for the people who are living with this trauma, with this horror, with this victimization? Like, as an audience member, you might want the catharsis of a revenge thriller. You might want a character who goes out into the night and punishes people for their wrongdoing in a badass, kind of vaguely sexy way. But is that in any way constructive or helpful? Does that actually do anything? And what level of that violence are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with doing it to a man assaulting a woman? Are you comfortable doing it to a woman who maybe, gossiped or laughed about it? Are you comfortable doing to an official who didn't properly investigate this? Are you comfortable doing it to a lawyer whose job it was to handle this case and defend his client? And constantly the movie pushes you, and it pushes you as an audience member. You have to go, am I comfortable with that? Does this make me comfortable? Does this make me uncomfortable? And it just continuously does this throughout. And I found it dazzling. I found it startling. And again, I found it.
Oh no, amazing. I can't agree with you more. Everything you're saying is truth here, and this movie and this movie is. Just in case we're talking about Promising Young Woman. In case you don't know what movie we're talking about.
Sound of Metal took a very sharp turn in its first act.
No, we're talking about Promising Young Woman, and the pacing of it, the way every sequence, like you said, when it asks you, the audience, what are you doing watching this sequence? What are you hoping to get out of it? And as it slowly twists what it is you actually get out of it, it takes its time and it's
Yeah.
paced very specifically and very purposefully to make sure, like, is this what you want? Maybe if we twist it a little bit. Now, is this what you want? Now, cut, cut, cut. Is this what you want? It is not like, this isn't Darren just pulling from the arty farty ether here, as you
I
know.
do that as well.
Well,
I
we all do that. We all do that. But the it's very purposeful in when it does that, and it's a. I know, like, subverting expectations can be a bit of a buzzword, and it can be a bit of a buzzkill, but the way in which this movie does it, it becomes, I don't know if I want to say satisfying, because I don't know if by the end of it I was satisfied, but I had an experience.
And I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Right.
Like, I saw this last March. I can't remember that much of Godzilla versus Kong, and we talked about it for an hour and a half last week. But this has stayed with me. And I mean, I say that, like, you know, we all enjoyed Godzilla versus Kong. I enjoyed it a bit less than you guys, but I still enjoyed it. But like a year and a month after I've seen this, I am still turning this over in my head. It is the only Best Picture nominee I've watched more than once. Which is fascinating. I will probably watch Nomadland again next week. Thank you for that, Jack. But I like, outside of that, like, and I say this as the guy who likes Mank on the podcast. I have not watched Mank more than once. That gives you an idea of how invested I am in Mank. But like, I have watched Promising Young Woman 5 times, and every time I've done it, I've found something more in terms of what it's doing and what it's saying and how it's doing it, and the way in which it pushes buttons, and it doesn't go for easy targets, because again, when you watch the trailer, you imagine it's going to be like, you know, I Spit on Your Grave, or Taken, or, you know, the Charles Bronson Death Wish movies, or something like that, or the Jennifer Garner, was it Miss Potter or whatever that one was, or Candy, or whatever, like that one was, not Hard Candy.
Right.
Candy,
usually in those kind of movies, there is a very clear villain, bad guy, so we enjoy the revenge porn. Absolutely,
the catharsis of it, yeah, and it's about our catharsis as much as anybody else's.
Right.
Like, you know, in real life, that's not how people who deal with these things get catharsis. And in fact, like, I would argue one of the movie's big points is that we as a society don't know how to help people who live with these things, and we should probably be very clear, actually. It's about sexual assault, and it's about the legacy of sexual assault, and it's about the idea of the people who live with sexual assault, not just directly the people affected, but the people who are caught in the orbit of people who are also affected, and how these things are things that we do not necessarily have a vocabulary. And I don't necessarily mean in terms of retribution or violence or punishment. We don't have a vocabulary for understanding the navigation of that trauma and for getting better. And like, this is where I'm going to be very careful here, because we're not talking about spoilers yet, but we are talking vaguely about what the movie's about. One of the big questions in this movie is the idea of Cassie, the main character played by Carey Mulligan. Fantastic performance. She is dealing with, her friend was assaulted in college. There was nothing done about it. There were no consequences for anybody involved. It is very clear very early on that Cassie has not come to terms with this. And to be clear, that's not her fault whatsoever. And the film is very clear it is not her fault whatsoever. It's because there's no mechanism for providing that closure. And one of the things I find fascinating about the film is the film asks us as an audience why the only thing that we can think of in response to this is violence or retribution or harm or hurt. And like, it's a very bright movie. It's very colorful. It's very well made. We mentioned the Instagram aesthetic that it has running through it. It is darkly funny throughout, but like, it also broke my heart. It broke my heart the first time I saw it. Broke my heart the second time I saw it. It broke my heart pretty much every time I saw it. And it's the small moments in it. Like, there's a moment in it where Clancy Brown, and for like a generation of film fans, Clancy Brown is the epitome of like tough guy 80s masculinity. He's, you know, Kurgan from, you know, Highlander, and like Lex Luthor from Superman the Animated Series, and like the tough guy. And he's still the tough guy. I think like on Invincible on Amazon, he plays like the demon detective. But but here he's just this emotionally naked father figure. And there's a moment in the movie that breaks my heart every single time I watch it. And it's the moment when Cassie has what looks like a bright spot. Like, it looks like she might find a way out from under this thing that she's under. And her father, and it's a small moment. It's not a big weepy like best supporting actor moment, but like Clancy Brown just goes like, we love Nina like a daughter, and we miss her every day, but we really missed you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he just turns around and he leaves because he's got nothing more to say. And that's a moment where every time I watch it, I'm like, I think I'm crying a little bit. And like, it's not what you expect from the trailer. It's not what you expect from the setup.
Right.
And it works beautifully.
Well,
I think like that's the movie's appeal.
Like you said, the mechanism for getting over something as traumatic as this, film usually converts that into violence because that is a button that you can put on it. Well, I've gotten revenge now. My life's all better. The movie doesn't have to think about it anymore. You don't have to think about it anymore. Ha ha ha.
Thank God we dealt with that problem.
We dealt with that, right? When in reality, it's years, it's time, it's investment, it's a lot. And I saw someone in the chat mention like the thesis statement that is this movie, and this is not spoiler talk because this happens very, very early on in the movie, but a very early sequence is when Cassie is walking down the street and she gets catcalled at. Like, this is something where if this was a revenge type movie, she'd get catcalled at and she'd, sock one of the guys or do a karate kick or whatever and be like, haha, she took care of them. They learned their lesson.
Or like later in the movie, they come back and she drop a car on them or something.
Exactly. And the entire movie is really summed up by that sequence, which is she just stares at them. And
she makes them look at themselves, which like again, it's the epitome. Like, in staring at them, and again, this is the Cassandra thing, the prophet who is not listened to.
Mm-hmm.
She gets them to look at themselves, and they do not like what they see. It's an amazing sequence because it's just a 2-shot. She's standing there eating a hot dog, and these guys are like, "Hey, honey, doing the walk of slave. Why don't you just turn around and shoot us a smile there? Hey, what you doing? hey, well, screw you, lady." And she doesn't say anything.
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. We're going to be in like the final 10 minutes here, so we are about to get into spoilers for Promising Young Woman because we have to talk about the end. But just know, go see it. It's not what you think, and it's not even what you think after I say it's not what you think. It's you're gonna like it. It's such a well-made movie. Definitely my number two. Pick, only because my love for Mr. Holland's opus outweighs everything else.
You don't have to justify it. Look, you don't. I have Mank as number 2. I'm making no apologies. You have got nothing to be sorry for.
Damn right, you're right. Actually, I take it all back. At least it's not Mank, a movie I haven't seen,
but I have strong opinions about.
All right, so yes, thank you in chat. We are talking spoilers for Promising Young Woman right now. All right, so the movie ends for those of you who have not seen the movie and still are here for spoilers,
but are sticking around.
So the first thing I want to talk about is the rom-com that starts up in the middle of the movie. As once again, I did not see it turning into a happy rom-com sequence that ends up. Oh boy, tragic, which is a beautiful take on it.
Yeah, I kind of saw that. I saw the twist coming. I knew that she was going to find something out about him in his past. I knew that he was going to have done something and it was going to be taken out like from under her. But I think like the skill of the filmmaking and the casting, and like again, like the casting here is so on point. The film uses all these wonderful nice guy actors. So you have like I mentioned like Clancy Brown like as this like doting father, but it has like Adam Brody, like this, Seth from the OC as Jerry, and the guy who's like, hey, look, maybe we should like respect the women we work with. And then it's like, oh my God, he turns out he's actually a rapist. He's not a racist. We don't know that he's a racist, but he is a potential rapist. But it has like McLovin, it has like Sam Richardson from Veep, it has Alfred Molina, and it kind of weaponizes your expectations there. But you have like Bo Burnham, and he is so good in that role and so good with her that even though like I knew from the structure of the film that like she was going to be a hope spot and she was going to end up disappointed, that even then I ended up disappointed because the film does the really good work with it where like you're disappointed early on where it does that thing where it's like, oh hey, we went out walking together and we're by my apartment, would you like to come up for a drink? And like as an audience member your heart sinks, you're like, you screwed up, Brian, you're
Mm-hmm.
just one of those guys. And then the movie like gradually has him claw back your respect and your love, and you kind of want to root for him,
Mm-hmm.
and you have those like the dinner sequence with him and the parents is just pitch perfect where it's, you know, like it's funny, it's really fucking funny, the sequence where they're like, you know, your parents must be so proud that you're a doctor, and it's like, well actually they wanted me to be a DJ. But like those moments are so fantastic, and like the moments where they do the Paris Hilton dance in the pharmacy like as a montage of their happy togetherness,
Yes.
and then it just pulls the rug out from under you. And it's not even that like he did something awful in his past, it's the way in which the movie pitch perfectly manages his response to it, where because again like this is one of the interesting kind of questions with the movie, is this idea of if you do this thing, can you be forgiven? Is there a way back for you? And like the character of Alfred Molina as the lawyer Jordan Green, who has kind of the epiphany of
Yes.
realizing that he did this terrible thing and like begging her forgiveness, and her giving him that absolution,
Mm-hmm.
shows that yes, you can if you're sorry. Like there's this whole thing that runs through it where Cassie isn't just targeting people who hurt people in a direct physical sense. She's targeting the entire system. She goes after the dean who didn't properly investigate it. She goes after her best friend, her and kind of Nina's best friend Maddie as well. And like it's people who are complicit in this system. You don't have to have actually done anything. You just have to have enabled it and kind of stood by
Mm-hmm.
and let it happen. And I think like that's one of the things the movie, that when we talked about the movie pushing the button of are you comfortable with this? I think it's very, very clever and very intentional that you have Cassie directing her rage at women as much as men,
Well,
because you're not used to seeing women being targeted as complicit in this stuff. And it makes
absolutely.
you as a viewer go, wait, is this cool? Is this comfortable? Is this. And
Yeah.
the thing with Ryan is like Ryan, he's on the video. He was there when this happened. He didn't speak up. He didn't do anything. And all the characters in the movie keep saying, like, well, we were kids. We were idiots. We didn't know what was right or wrong.
Right.
And you get that moment when she confronts him and he immediately acts like in the moment he acts kind of taciturn and ashamed and kind of quiet. He's like, Cassie, you gotta forgive me. Tell me you forgive me. Tell me that you know that I'm sorry and I'm not that person anymore, because he just wants forgiveness and absolution. And the moment that it becomes clear that she's not going to give it to him, you have that like wonderful turn
Just and
where
it's
he just
it's tiny. It's a tiny little rage turn, but it's there and it's been bubbling. And like you said, with the contrast of the Alfred Molina character, where like sure he might be sorry about it, but has done literally nothing to earn that forgiveness over his life. That's the real point of it, and what makes that like I don't even know if we want to call that a heel turn, but it
yeah.
makes his character turn that much more heartbreaking to understand. Like, oh, not only like you might not have done anything, you let it happen, and you've done nothing since to make up for that. And that it was
And and
heartbreaking,
when it comes
perfect.
back up, your immediate response is, well, how does this affect me? Like the wonderful bitter moment where like she turns and she says, well, don't tell anybody or I'll send out the video to everybody you know. And he's like, well, then we'd both be fucking failures, wouldn't we? And you're just, and it's just such
Ooh,
a perfect moment because
just a
it's
knife twist. Yeah.
that anger and that entitlement
Mhm.
that you meant, like, because it's not about him being sorry, it's not about him being a nice guy, it's him being, well, I don't deserve to be challenged. Who is this to challenge me? Like, I'm a good guy. Who's to call me out for this? And like, I
Mhm.
really, really love that moment. And then obviously there's the ending that follows, which is
Well, and
usually
and I have heard, and so she then she goes full revenge, goes to actually confront the rapist, drugs an entire bachelor party, and is going to kind of carve her friend's name into the rapist when the rapist kills her, which is an incredibly brutal death scene.
yeah.
Uh, you know,
It just goes on.
it
Like
the it's well, again, we kind of talk about this in their pacing, their editing. the way in which that scene is edited, and they keep cutting back to her face under a pillow while the rapist is doing is like putting his knee on top of her. The sound design of that, where it, if you were on the other side of a door, it kind of sounds like two people having sex. The way it's all crafted, we can't speak more highly of this movie. But the thing I want to touch on is the end of the movie. We do get a quasi happy ending, and I have heard rumors that this might not have necessarily been the planned ending. She kind of had after she dies, she has a little like contingency plan to make sure all the people who did bad stuff were punished after she had died.
Yeah, the original plan for the ending, Emerald Fenland's original ending was, and part of me is kind of like, part of me respects this.
Mm-hmm.
Respects this is a very key word here. I'm not sure it's the best idea, but if it had happened, I'd been like, damn, Emerald, I appreciate you for committing to what you're doing. The original ending was going to be that she would be smothered, she would be killed, and that would be the end of the movie. There would be no justice whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And it would very much commit to the thesis point of the movie, which is that like Cassie's not going to get catharsis here.
Yeah.
Part of me also understands that like the financiers were like, we're giving you several $1 million. Maybe you could just, just put a little bit on the top there. And I think like it is a compromise. And I know like we've had people on the podcast before who've said, it's a movie about sexual assault where the cops get to be the hero at the end. And it's like, that's a little bit of a cheat. And I can see that. But at the same time, part of me is also like, yeah, but you see, the cops arrive and they arrest a guy for murder. And the problem isn't that getting convictions for murder is difficult. Mm-hmm. The problem is getting convictions for sexual assault is difficult. And prosecuting sexual assault is difficult.
Right.
It's not a problem to say that, well, if this dude killed her, he will probably face consequences. It's a problem that there was nothing that helped Cassie prevent getting to that situation where she ended up being killed, and this in order to get something resembling justice that she will never see. And like, to the movie's credit, one of the things I adore about it, and I'm sorry, we're running dangerously close to going over time.
It's great.
Once like there's a moment at the end where, and again, this gets into the idea of like what the movie is, and the idea that we don't have a grammar for talking about things like dealing with trauma outside of these kind of revenge movies. But the idea that like, once Cassie puts herself in that situation, she loses control of the narrative, because there's no narrative framework for your best friend was raped in college and committed suicide and nothing was done with it and you moved on with your life. There's no stories that we tell about those. I can't think of any stories that we tell about that. On the other hand, once she inserts herself into a narrative about violence and men and kind of like the brutality that men and women inflict on each other, it becomes a dead hooker or a dead stripper story. And the only role that Cassie can play in that stereotypical archetypal structure that we have is the dead stripper. And one of the things that I really, and admire is a very strong word for this, because it's a really uncomfortable and it's really harrowing and it's really horrible and it just sits in your gut. And like, being with the audience the first time that happened, silence. Nobody knew what to make of it. It was astounding. But like, you don't see her face. After she's smothered, the film makes a very conscious choice to avoid showing Cassie's face, because it's not her story anymore. It's not, she has no agency. The moment that she decided that this was the only way that she could get her catharsis or her release. And again, this is one of the things where I need to be very careful about how I talk about this, because it could sound bad if I don't. But there's a moment when she's talking to Alfred Molina, and Cassie very clearly feels guilty about what happened to Nina. To be clear, she shouldn't. She had no complicity in what happened. It was not her fault whatsoever. But I think anybody who has had something terrible happen to somebody that they know feels a sense of responsibility or guilt for that, because I should have been there, or I should have helped, or I should have done something, or I shouldn't have let that happen. I should have intervened, or I should have, somehow known that this was going to happen and stepped in. And that's survivor's guilt. And survivor's guilt is not rational, and there's no blame attributed to it. I want to be clear. But there's a real sense running through the movie. And like, when she talks to Alfred Molina's character, when he begs her for forgiveness, he asks, "Are you here to hurt me?" And she says, "Do you want me to hurt you?" And his response is, "I think I do." And the movie kind of implies that Cassie wants to be hurt, Because like if you think about the situations she puts herself in,
Mm-hmm.
she puts herself in situations where she goes out every night, she meets men, she lets them take them back to her place, and then accuses them of sexually assault and holds up a mirror to them. That is a very high risk behavior. That is not a behavior that is safe or reasonable or necessarily going to end well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, I'll wrap up now in a second. But like there is this sense of kind of running through the movie of like Cassie like being self-destructive. And I think Emerald Fenlon, I think Terry Mulligan have talked about it as an addiction.
Mm.
And it's very much presented as an addiction. Like that moment with Ryan, where like she realizes that Al Monroe is getting married and everything just falls apart, and then she ends up going out to the nightclub. And it's very much like a degeneration that's happening. And it's addictive behavior. And I think the movie understands that Cassie can't have a happy ending, but it also understands that, on the other hand, for the audience, and to be honest, for Cassie posthumously, Cassie needs to have the last word. And the movie is very cleverly structured to literally give her the last word, in that the movie's closing image is a text message that she sends. She gets the closing word on what the story is.
Well, and
I
oh, sorry, you were just about to button up. You thought what I was going to add to this is we do get a happy ending. This is big old quotes happy ending. In which like her
Al is kind of taken away. Al is taken away in cuffs.
Yes, her murderer, the rapist, the thing that ignited her story is taken care of. But we also have the entire system, none of whom face any consequences whatsoever. That's like I love that scene was saw through the eyes of Ryan and her text message with him, where like I kept waiting for her to like have a
link the video
in a text chain, and no, because she kept her word, she did not share the video. He faces no repercussions. The dean faces no repercussions, right? Like the entire the friend Maddie faces no long lasting repercussions. Because the system is still there. And that's why I think it's a good compromise to give us a little bit of a happy ending while also understanding that the system is still there that brought this on in the first place. And just a solid picture. It's exactly, I'm upset that I didn't get a chance to see this in the theaters because of that crowd reaction at every single turn. I was expecting this to be a lot more graphic than it was. I guess that's another thing to talk about, is it accomplishes all this without being overtly graphic about any of it.
Like, yeah, I mean, like, again, and Fennel's kind of talked about this, like things like making a choice never to show the video involving Nina, for example. You just hear it. And again, like, it's a funny thing. I'm not sure I should laugh about it, but the fact that Bo Burnham's voice is so distinctive that, like, it can be, you realize that Bo Burnham was there simply by having Bo Burnham say something very loudly on the video. But like things like that, which are very kind of clever, and the way in which the movie, like, it even preserves a number of kind of ambiguous elements. Like I think that like Emerald Fennel and kind of Mulligan have talked about how they will never reveal what the red and blue color coding is on the Notebook. But I believe the script hints that the red ones are men who got violent.
Yes.
I think the script hints at that, if I remember correctly.
From context, that's what I would say. It seemed to be a gradient scale of how far they went. That's at least what we see.
And we only see blue. Yeah, we only see blue.
Yeah.
And again, like the way in which it makes you wait as well, because you're not sure what happens to Jerry until later you get like Sam Richardson's character saying, "Hey, you're the crazy girl that Jerry mentioned." So you know Jerry's perfectly fine.
Yeah. Well, he didn't. She very clearly said, he didn't get too far, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, I know we're a little over time now.
Sorry, apologies about that.
You should not, because, a lot of times we can be very harsh on movies. We can be very critical on movies. And it is so much fun to gush over movies that are made so well. And as people who see so many movies, to also be surprised by a movie is a very special thing.
Yeah.
promising
And again,
young
like
woman.
how
Yeah.
beautiful like the composition is. Things like the little halo effects that you get on her, the way in which her kind of like her mother's kitsch furniture looks like angel wings behind her as well.
Mhm.
The constant use of like religious imagery, the kind of center shots. Like there's a wonderful sequence where herself and Alfred Molina are talking, and they're shot opposite one another. Again, standard 2-shot setup, but like you have they're both symmetrically framed. She's symmetrically framed by two vases over her shoulder, and he's symmetrically framed by two dead flowers, two kind of dead plants that are like fallen over as well. And you have this kind of juxtaposition between the two of them as well, and it's so good. It's so well made. And even things like the soundtrack, the way in which it reclaims kind of like 2000s kind of like pop stuff. So things like fucking what's her name, Paris Hilton, like Stars Are Blind. Again, that sequence with the pharmacy, and I love that. It's like I haven't done this in a pharmacy in at least a couple of weeks, but like that whole sequence is so corny and so cheesy, but you need it as an audience member, and you're like, they're so cute together. Like all that stuff is just, it's so immaculately put together. The kind of the slow pan up her dress with like the white and the red, which looks like blood drops on it. The sequences where her and Maddie are drinking and Maddie knocks the red wine over, so you get like the red spilled on the white tablecloth. Like it's just so beautifully put together.
It's anti-exploitation. It is like, not because not only is it a commentary on the world, but it is also a commentary on exploitation film. Who film has a bad history of using subjects like this as just an excuse to get T&A in a movie or violence in a movie, and it just rips the heart right out of it. Oh, so we could go on forever, but
sorry.
But we're gonna stop now. If you haven't seen it, even after we spoiled it, it doesn't matter. Go see it. It's beautiful cinema. Obviously, we both recommend it very, very much. Thank you guys for watching and or listening to this. I think I'm getting messages from Nick saying, "Wrap it up. We're doing it."
Okay. Next week, we will be talking about Nomadland, because I know people have been asking to know in advance what we're talking about. So we did say we talk about Nomadland. We did say we talk about The Father. So if you want to keep pace with us, you can do that.
Yes, that's a great idea. That'll wrap up all of our Best Picture noms before the Oscar, at least all the ones I care about.
I think we should do a bonus episode on Mank on the day of the ceremony. Start the credits, Jack, before I get in there and suggest the Mank episode. Mooney on Mank. It's great. We can do it in black and white. We can put like a black and white filter on it. We can broadcast in mono. It'll be fantastic.
That's a great idea, actually. I'll be honest with you. Oh.
I actually talked you into a Mank episode.
Oh, you might have.
Fantastic.
Son of a bitch.